This is the 6-month anniversary of healthcare reform. I mean, first of all, I just wanted to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, healthcare reform, historic legislation passed, already a number of important provisions going into effect. Seniors getting free preventive care, business people getting significant tax assistance and credits for providing health care to their employees, maintaining young people on their parents' policy while they're below 26 years of age, making sure that people cannot be rescinded if they get sick. These are all important things. They've already begun to help people quite a bit. And I'm telling you, even despite all of the industry and Republican basically slandering of the bill, Americans are not going to let it go after it goes into effect because it just means too much in terms of their quality of life.
Well, I mean, now we're celebrating the 6-month anniversary. I mean, what yet needs to be done in terms of explaining to people what it means for them, clarifying?
Well, one of the biggest challenges that to help them understand it goes into effect in stages. So, for example, some of the most effective provisions, which are that you won't be able to be dropped for a pre-existing condition or denied for a pre-existing condition, that's not going to happen until 2014. That, the fact that when 32 million Americans will be joining it around 2014, that's not going to happen. So people who are not insured now, they're going to get that benefit in the next few years, but it's not there now. So helping them understand that help is on the way, even if it hasn't really gotten there yet, is an important challenge. And then helping people understand that, a lot of the opposition to the bill is, basically industry and their Republican allies trying to run over the bill. Here's the thing. Nobody likes the status quo. If you tell people, is the way we've been doing it the right way, nobody's going to say yes. Now, some people would, they're not being honest. They like it the way it is because it means they make a lot of money. It's a marvelously lucrative industry, as people know. But for middle-class folks trying to put food on the table, it doesn't work. It's disjointed. It doesn't make any sense. 60% of all bankruptcy filings are due to medical debt, and it doesn't work. And so that's the thing, helping people understand that that the anxiety around changing to something new is not as uncomfortable as the situation we're already in. And so that's the thing, moving away from the status quo. I mean, some smart person had once said, changing the status quo was an incredibly difficult thing to do because people who are going to perhaps gain by changing from the status quo, their benefits are uncertain. And people who are going to lose by changing the status quo, what they're going to lose is certain. And so, the people who are against changing the status quo often fight more vociferously than the people who are basically operating on what they hope to have but never did have. So, I mean, it really is a heavy lift, but we're getting there.
Yeah. 9 days ago, the 9th anniversary of the 9/11 attacks, you've spoken at length on Minnesota Public Radio and elsewhere, about this firestorm of debates about the community center near Ground Zero in Manhattan, and this radical pastor's talk about burning Korans in Florida. How did we get to this point? What happened? Where did we go wrong?
Well, I think that one of the things you cannot dismiss is the fact that there are a group of determined individuals whose whole livelihood revolves around whipping up hate and hysteria against Muslims, right? There's something called Jihad Watch. There's something else called the Stop the Islamization of America. And these websites and the people who operate them are the moral equivalent of the Ku Klux Klan when it comes to the Muslims. So these people, they're not going to stop just because of an election, and they're not going to ramp it up because of an election, but they're going to use elections, they're going to use anxiety, and they're going to use fear, and they use sympathy around around 9/11 victims and first responders to try to perpetuate their movement, which is a movement based on the false idea that the Muslims are the problem, and that Islam is the problem, and that if we just abuse the Muslims and try to get rid of them, then maybe everything will be lovely again, And with this kind of scapegoating has a deeply rooted history in human events, and whether it's Catholics or Jewish people or any group or African Americans, we know what scapegoating is all about, and there's nothing short of that. Now, how did it whip up all of a sudden? Well, because you have this animated group that is directing the events, and you have kind of some dry kindling out there. What do I mean by that? Well, what I mean by that is that we, as a society, we know back in September 11, 2001, that our country was hit by 19 terrorists who professed Islam, right? And yet, in that time, we've never really learned enough about Islam to know, well, what does this mean? Now, we know a lot about Christianity, and we know that the Ku Klux Klan might claim that they're Christians and they burn a cross. We also know Martin Luther King's Christian. We also know the pastor most people are Christians, so they know the difference between this guy's a wacko and these folks are good folks. Well, we don't, as Americans, we don't know enough about the Muslim community to really say, these folks are the good folks and those folks are just a bunch of crazies. And so, so we need to really try to reach out on an interfaith basis, promote interfaith dialogue from church to mosque to synagogue to Hindu temples to Baha'i to Buddhist. We need to reach out. This can be done on the local level and should be done on the local level. We also need responsible political and cultural leaders to say, look, America's here for everyone, like the way Obama did and the way that Mayor Bloomberg did and the way that other leaders have done to be responsible. And we also need to continue to make sure that we don't succumb to, the baser instinct of saying, well, we are going to profile all the Middle Eastern people and the Muslim people, and we are going to, sort of like give into our fear and only deal with the Muslim world on the basis of counterterrorism, not trade, not art, not history, not education, just counterterrorism. And so, these are the things we've got to do. But what happened? Highly animated, motivated group, broad, widespread lack of information, all kind of came together at the same time. Plus an election. Can't discount that. But it's not all about an election. But it did play an important role. Like Rick Lazio, Palladino, they're both trying to out anti-Islam each other in New York, And so, these kind of things pop up and sometimes get blown out of proportion.
I mean, so we've seen this kind of rise of perhaps fundamentalist Christian protectionism, and we've also seen the rise of the Tea Party, which professes a lot of things: anti-government, anti-Obama, perhaps fear of change. Are these parallel movements? Are they one and the same, or are they movements that just kind of intersect occasionally?
They're parallel movements that intersect occasionally. I mean, for example, the Tea Party movement is essentially a secular movement, right, whereas some of the Pat Robertson type movement, and again, it's important not to lump all evangelical Christians together. Some of them are leading voices on the environment, on tolerance, on all kinds of things. But, there is this one strain that it seems extremely intolerant to anybody who's not exactly like them, Reverend Hagee, for example. People like that, and but they stand on separate pieces of ground. They got different footprints, but I think both see themselves as sort of like right-wing populist movements, and you will see intersection and dovetail, but I think both of them are so exclusive and so stridently independent that I don't think it would be right to conclude that there's going to be some massive convergence, because why would Hagee say to some secular Tea Partyists that, okay, I'm going to pack up my bags and travel along with you? They're both trying to co-opt each other all at the same time, and so I don't think it's necessarily the case that there's going to be a convergence, although of course their potentiality is there.
The pastor in Florida who we've alluded to, I'm not going to name him because I don't want to give him any more press, but yeah. Well, that's the next question I want to ask. The White House or the administration, to some degree, did reach out to him, engage him, or attempt to engage him. Secretary of Defense Gates called him. It sounds like Petraeus addressed him in reports to the AP. I mean, did the administration handle him the right way? Did they engage him to the extent they needed to, or should they have ignored him?
You know, the administration did what they had to do when it came to that Florida pastor. And the reason why is you had protests erupting all across the globe. So you had them in Afghanistan, you had them in Indonesia. You probably, if he'd have burned those Korans and been able to get some film of it and put it up on YouTube, you know, it could have ignited, you know, tensions all over the world. And it would have played perfectly into the hands of the terrorist types like bin Laden, but also people like Anwar al-Awlaki, who's sort of the new voice of terrorism, American-born, very persuasive, evil to the core. And so, you know, they would have loved this. I think Obama's right. It would have been a recruiting bonanza for him to be able to achieve this. And just like I said, there are these highly animated elements on the American anti-Islamist movement. You know, no question about it. There's these highly animated, very purposeful people who use the veneer of Islam to wage their evil movement. You know, and what they're always trying to do is try to act like they're standing up for the Muslim community. Well, they're not standing up for the Muslim community. They kill more Muslims than they do any other kind of religious group. But they tell that lie because it helps them recruit. I mean, they're saying that, oh, America's at war with Islam, and that's how they reach out to a person like Faisal Shahzad or Omar Abu Muttalib or Nidal Hassan. That's how they reach out to these kind of people, by making a claim of religious piety, victimization, and you have a duty to do something about it, and that includes the prescription that I've given for you, which is to kill yourself and many, many other people. So we're basically dealing with at least two really, really dangerous strains, you know, and of course the terrorist one is even more dangerous than the anti-Islamist one because they're killers, you know. But the anti-Islamist one is problematic because they feed into the hands of the terrorist killers. But so what we've got to do is people of goodwill and responsibility is continue to assert what we have always asserted about America, which is it's open, free, fair, and that's the kind of country we want, and that's the kind of country we're going to have.
Yeah. I wanted to switch over quickly to the Islamic Community Center in Manhattan, which of course is not a mosque exclusively and not right on ground zero, right? It's a little ways away, and it's an Islamic Community Center. And the idea is that it would promote interfaith tolerance, right? I read in the most recent issue of the New Yorker's Talk of the Town, they kind of, I don't know if you've read this piece or read the New Yorker, but they led off the piece basically making an analogy between the right-wing anti-Islamic Community Center movement and the way it was disseminated to the press months after the community center gained the support of most New Yorkers. An analogy between that and the Danish newspaper Jyllands-Posten's, caricature cartoons of the Prophet, right, and how that did not raise a firestorm in Denmark or anywhere else right away. But according to the New Yorker, I think they used the word, radical imams took it to the Islamic world, to the Middle East, to heads of state, and kind of ignited a firestorm months later. Is that a fair analogy to call, the New Yorkers who went to the press and created a firestorm with these Danish imams?
I think that the life of both of these controversies traveled along very, very similar paths. Yeah. That the initial thing was no big deal, and then some highly animated, purposeful individuals went and essentially turned it into a controversy, which ignited the passions of a whole bunch of people who didn't really know what those propagandizers were doing. And so that really is very similar. And that's why I think it's important that we've got to be in this interfaith dialogue that I was talking about. I mean, one of the things that that I have tried to say repeatedly, and I'll say it now, is that, look, when somebody is trying to provoke you, the last thing you should do is to reward them by being provoked. right? Don't reward. I mean, if that pastor in Florida and these anti-Islamic Center people are trying to provoke you, don't be provoked. And the Muslim community must learn the same lesson. I mean, look, a cartoon or even a burning of a Koran should not make you go out and do something harmful to another person. It is ridiculous to say, well, they burned a picture of the prophet, or they drew a picture of the prophet, or burned the Quran, so that I'm going to break windows and hurt other people. This is an absurd thing, and I'm hoping that responsible Islamic leaders and leaders of all faiths will say, look, don't be provoked when they're trying to provoke you. And, by the way, I mean, burning a Quran is intended to be an incredibly disrespectful act. That's the purpose of it. But it's also important to bear in mind that when Qurans have been used for over the years and are worn down and need to be retired, the way to return them to the earth is burning them. It's important, and so just hearing, oh, somebody burned the Quran, well, they burned it for the purpose of insulting, not the fact that they burned it. I mean, burning it in and of itself is not even an inherently evil thing to do, and because you don't want to throw it in the garbage, you'd want to return it to the earth, right? So what's my point? My point is, look, there are literally thousands, perhaps millions of people around the world who know every single word of the Quran. They're called a Hafiz al-Quran, or Hafiz or Hafiz, however you want to pronounce it, and they know it by heart. So if they burn all of them, there's people who can make more, so don't be provoked, right? Don't be upset by this, and understand that that, by the way, Prophet Muhammad would never be provoked by something like this. And do you mind if I take the moment just to recount a quick little story?
Please.
Okay, well, there was an occasion where a man came into one of the mosque when Prophet Muhammad and the early companions were there, and he began to urinate on the floor of the mosque. This is when Prophet Muhammad was teaching. He was out there. He was doing what he did, and this man urinated on the floor of the mosque. And you can imagine the companions of the prophets, the most early believers, fervent believers, rose up to seize this man, right? Much like anybody would do today if somebody was desecrating their religious institution. Prophet Muhammad said, stop. Let him finish. And this man proceeded to continue to urinate on the floor of the mosque. And then Prophet Muhammad said, you guys get some water and, wipe it away. And then the man was completely, discombobulated by the reaction of Prophet Muhammad. And he said, I came in here with a lot of questions about you, but the way you handled me answered all those questions. And I want to sit here and listen to what you have to say now. So this kind of way of handling people, not being provoked, be calm, and understand that it's just a book, it's just paper, This is a very important lesson, and I want to say to anybody who's Muslim within the sound of my voice, it is no excuse to harm any person or property because of this kind of a provocative act. And I urge other religious leaders not to counsel people that same way.
Perhaps this is the religious analogy to Christ's turn the other cheek, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And there were many other terms. And so, but then again, if people really listen to what their teachers taught them, we would behave so much differently. Clearly, anyone who wants to harm that pastor or anybody else because of a threatened Quran burning is operating out of an ego space, and they're operating out of some sort of a tribal space, and they're operating out of protecting their identity and their group. What are you protecting? You're not protecting anything. You're protecting a piece of paper, which, one piece of paper is like any other, right? So this is what I want to say about that don't be provoked. Certainly don't reward your provocateur with being provoked.
You aware of the march on the National Mall that Jon Stewart has planned for October 30th? I can't. The official name eludes me, but a rally to avoid being reactionary and to take it down a notch, America. What are your thoughts on that? Will that, I mean, from a comedian, political pundit, could that have an effect?
Well, Jon Stewart's proposed rally march is in one of the finest traditions of American history. You don't forget that 1963, MLK spoke to about 250,000 people about the need to do away with Jim Crow, and it had a big impact on our society. It led directly from there to the 1964 Civil Rights Act. Of course, we had the 4 little girls get blown up in Birmingham along the way. But I think that it's important for cultural icons like Jon Stewart to counsel people toward their better selves, maybe with a joke. I do think that is a great idea. When you got Glenn Beck trying to whip up people, and of course he has every right to do what he's doing, you need somebody to counterbalance that and say, you know what, can we think a little bit and maybe even see some humor in some of this? I think it's important, and I thank him for doing it.
Will you attend? And have you, at all kind of tried to use humor to de-escalate tensions?
I'm not funny. I wish I was. If I was funny, I would use humor, but I got to do other things because I ain't funny. I mean, Jon Stewart, I love that show. And, a lot of people watch him. And, I mean, he is like the voice for so many because he is so talented at what he does. And he, speaks truth to power every day with a smile. And I think that's great. Will I go? I haven't been invited, but if I am, I will seriously entertain it because I think it's a good effort.
Final question. We've been doing some reports in the UpTake kind of about this rift within the Republican Party between the old moderates and the Tea Party. What do you make of this rift? What is it going to mean ultimately for the Republican Party in the November elections and beyond? And which side is going to prevail?
I tell you this. It is a real problem that the Republicans have. I think at the beginning, a lot of Democrats thought the Tea Party was going to be their problem. Tea Party is not the Democrats' problem. Tea Party is Republicans' problem. I think that it has an element of being healthy, but it also has a very detrimental health aspect to it. So, for example, you used to have Republican moderates, people like Jim Ramstad, people who, there were a lot of Republicans, were willing to support civil rights. 22 Republicans voted for Medicare back in 1965. None voted for it, the health care reform today. And there used to be these moderate Republicans. Now the Tea Party is wiping these kind of people away. And so that party is going to be represented by the most extreme intolerant elements. This is a bad thing. And because every party needs some diversity in it. And they're saying that they won't tolerate any diversity in their party, that everybody else must toe the line. And that's a scary thing. And then the other thing is that, at the end of the day, no movement that is fueled by anger alone can really ever amount to good. It can't. How could they possibly? I mean, think about it. Right now they say that they're so concerned about the deficit. And then, but at this moment, we're also having a debate about whether or not the top 2% are going to get their tax cut, which would add about $700 billion in 1 year to the deficit. So they're not even clear on whether they want to cut the deficit or whether they want to have the richest people get a tax cut. They're just confused. It's a confused movement. And you have elements in it who want to eliminate the 14th Amendment so that immigrants who have children here can't claim citizenship. They want to get rid of the 17th Amendment. They want to get rid of the EPA. They want to get rid of the Department of Education. It is a confused movement that doesn't really even know what it wants. And so with that level of confusion over there and the level of fervent hate of Obama, I'm just not sure what's going to happen to those guys. I can't conceive of how it's going to be good. But if there was a higher degree of civility, then it would be good because it would mean that people would debate ideas. But I'm not seeing civility out of the Tea Party. I mean, some parts of it, you see it, but other parts of it, you don't. Like going to the whole healthcare debates with guns on, saying I'm asserting my Second Amendment rights. This is ugly because there's an implied threat of violence there. And so, I mean, I think that there is something to be watched out for sure.
Are there still Republicans in Washington or also in Minnesota that you feel you can go to, to hear intelligent, though perhaps dissenting, voices?
Yeah, there's a lot of Republicans that a Democrat can talk to, but you got to ask yourself, can you talk to them behind closed doors or in front of closed doors? Behind closed doors, there's a lot of them who are reasonable people, nice folks, but when they get on the camera, start rolling, then those reasonable ones start to evaporate, But I think there's a lot of good Republicans out there. I think that Eric Paulson is a guy who I can talk to. Of course, I prefer his Democratic opponent to him, but if he succeeds, that's fine because I think he's a good man, an honest, good guy. And then there's others as well. Zach Wamp from Tennessee's good guy. Jeff Davis, Jeff Fortenberry, Charles Bustani. There's a number of good, decent folks over there, but at the same time, and it's fun to debate with them on tax policy, economic policy, military security policy, because we're all in the same boat. We just kind of have different points of emphasis, but then again, there are some people who are extreme, and there's nobody in the Democratic Party who is extreme. There's people and whose methodology is also extreme. There might be some people who have some strongly held views, but they're not gonna strap on a weapon and say and go to a community meeting. That doesn't happen on the left side of the ledger. So I don't know what's going to happen over there. I think there's some worrisome things.
Real quick, just for your Twin Cities base, how much longer are you here, and what are you working on? What are you accomplishing? How's your time being filled before you head back to Washington?
Well, I'm back in the groove of during the week, midweek. I'm in Washington. On the weekends, I'm here. So I'm here. Today happens to be a Monday, and I'm here. I'll be here tomorrow, fly out tomorrow night. And then I would be back next weekend, but I got to go around the country to do some speeches and some fundraising. So I'm probably going to be home on a limited basis next weekend. And then I may have a few more days in Washington. And then after that, I'll be here to the election. And so I'm looking forward to spending a lot of time in the district over the course of October.
Speeches stumping for any other candidates when you travel around the country?
Yes, promoting other candidates, promoting tolerance, promoting inclusion, promoting, speaking around some of the more recent events around the Islamic Center, but then also talking about middle class prosperity, economic justice, and things like that.
I mean, you've become the go-to guy, I guess, for a lot of the perspectives in response to the debate about the community center. Is that right, that you've become the spokesperson of one of them, and are you comfortable with that?
This idea of me being a spokesperson around the Islamic Center is nothing I ever wanted. I wish other people would do it. Right. And when I ran for Congress, people, I was known to be working on healthcare, environmental justice, economic justice, never a religious figure. I happen to be Muslim, but I've never led a religious service in my life. I've turned down the opportunity to do so consistently. But you know what? It's like this. When the Bush administration said, would you go help us do public diplomacy in the Muslim world, even though I don't see myself as a Muslim leader, I didn't turn them down because I thought if it can help bridge some gaps and make friends for America, I'm going to do that. And on this issue, if I can try to help our countrymen and women see, remind them about our constitutional framework and our values that undergird our constitutional framework, then I'm gonna say those things. And so I'm looking to go back to talk about healthcare. I'm looking to go back to talk about environmental justice and economic justice. I'd be just as soon to just talk about that.